Awesome. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Just give me one more minute. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight for this really important conversation on everything streets and so much more. We're with my good friend Martin Ince with the city of Flagstaff. Martin is our multimodal planner and has been with the city for 25 years. Martin, good evening. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Adam. Thank you. 25 years goes by like.
Thank you. Yeah, it does go by fast. So Martin is a wealth of information and history and has been thinking about bike, peds, streets, congestion, and all these really important topics to our community for a long time. So we have the hour with Martin to dive into a bunch of these topics, which I'm so looking forward to with all of you. But before we really start diving into things, Martin, maybe just give a brief history on yourself and your background and your work at the city and any thoughts you'd like to share as an opening comment.
Sure. So as we mentioned, I've been with the city for 25 years. I'm trained as a land use planner, as a city planner. And when I first came to the city, that was what I worked on for the city. In the past 15 years or so, I've been working in transportation, specifically multimodal, so walking, biking, really anything that's not getting around by cars. And part of that includes managing the FOOTS program. So we do the planning, we find funding, we program them, and then help build them. So really, for me, it's been kind of a personal journey to get into transportation planning, particularly walking and biking, because it really is something that I've chosen for myself over the years, and really something that has resonated with me. I've been a bicyclist for a long time. Of course, all of us are all pedestrians for our entire lives. But it's really been enjoyable and rewarding in a place like Flagstaff to work on walking and biking issues.
Oh, I know, right? I always think about that. Here in Flagstaff, we have so much potential with our community and the active community that we have, and how we're not sprawled out too far. We have so much potential in being a leader on this front, and so yeah. Thank you for all your work for the city of Flagstaff over the 25 years, and it's really been a honor and a pleasure to work with you over the last few years. In my term, it's great to have you on our team. So let's jump right in. So Bike Month is right around the corner. Bike Month is all of May, and there's a lot going on that I'm going to walk you through. Maybe I'll go ahead and start with a screen share and show you the event page. And then Martin can also speak to, let's see, I think it's denying. Let's see if I can pull this off 1 second. Okay, I think this is working. You can see that, yeah?
We can see.
The Flagstaff Biking Organization is a local nonprofit, and they really help lead the way in a number of topics when it comes to local bicycle needs and topics and such. But on their website, under events, you can find a whole list about Bike Month and all this great information, where they're basically asking folks to track their rides and try riding, and basically, enter the running to win all sorts of great prizes. So here we go. May 1st through the 31st, Flagstaff Bike Month. Here's that bike challenge I was talking about, with all these great free raffles that they're giving away. and a silent auction. But there's a whole list of rides here and events from this kickoff on May 2nd to the Bike Bazaar on the 15th and the Kiddical Mass ride on the 17th. There's a lot going on, and it's really exciting. But Martin, what are your thoughts on Bike Month, and tell us about your class that you got coming up?
Yeah, Adam, it's probably worth mentioning that this is the first time that Flag Biking Organization has sponsored a Bike Month. It used to be Bike to Work Week. So 3 more weeks of fun and enjoyment. We are also doing a bicycle safety class to kind of kick off Bike Month, and it is scheduled tentatively for a week from Thursday, April 28th, from 6 to 7. I believe the physical location will be at the community college on Lone Tree, but I think it will also be live streamed. So
nice.
we can, Adam, are you willing to share the details with your group once we have it all set up? Okay.
Yeah. Stay posted. I'll definitely be sharing all sorts of good information like that. But yeah, that's great. That's really great. And we need more education and outreach. So folks, take advantage of that opportunity coming up soon. Yeah, a lot going on, and definitely hope folks engage. And big shout out to the Flagstaff Biking Organization for all their partnership. So shifting gears and starting to dive into the content of today's conversation, let's start off with congestion. Congestion's been a big topic around Flagstaff, whether it's due to the growing number of people traveling by car in our region and the growing number of people living in Flagstaff, to the recent construction that we're facing on the 40, which is creating all sorts of backups throughout town and really showing us what congestion can look like, and kind of really creating a real bumper-to-bumper scenario in Flagstaff. Martin, what are your general thoughts about congestion? And then we can, start talking about how do we address congestion?
Sure. So I'll give you a different way of thinking about congestion, and I think for some people this will feel a little bit counterintuitive, and I think for some people this will kind of resonate and make sense with their experience. But think of congestion as a form of equilibrium on a particular piece of roadway or at an intersection, and the equilibrium is between drivers who choose to be there at that place and that time, and people who choose to do something else. So if you know that a particular roadway is congested or an intersection is congested, you have a couple different options, really, whether you realize it or not. Your first option to avoid that place is to travel at a different time. So if you go through an intersection, or if you go up Milton at 8 o'clock and it's always crowded, but you go at 7:30 and it's pretty open, then your first choice is that you could travel at a different time and possibly avoid congestion. Second thing is that you could take a different route. So if Milton is congested, maybe you could go up Lone Tree. If Butler is congested, you could try Route 66. If you have different options in your routing, then you can learn how to get around congestion. The third, and of course the one that we're most fond of, is that you can choose a different mode. So if you don't want to be in your vehicle in congestion, you can walk or bike or take transit. And then finally, the last option that people make is they change how they travel, and essentially they limit their travel behavior. So instead of at 9 o'clock in the morning going out to the grocery store to get a gallon of milk, and then at 10 o'clock going to pick up your dry cleaning, at 11 o'clock going to meet somebody, that you start to combine those trips into one. So you're traveling and doing multiple things, or you travel with a friend or carpool, or you make other little adjustments like that to modify your travel behavior to kind of adapt to congestion. So that's really how congestion works as equilibrium, and some of the things that we can do to get around it. When we talk about expanding vehicle capacity to address congestion, and usually we mean widening roads. So we build wider roads, they have more space for vehicles. We've expanded vehicle capacity. And the issue with doing that is it changes that point of equilibrium and kind of fixes a different equation, but really with the same results. So when the road is wider, when there's more space on the road, when we have more lanes, we have turn lanes, more people can choose to drive and fewer people feel like they have to choose to do something else. So more people will be there at that same time, and we'll get right back to that same point of equilibrium that we started with, only with more lanes or more capacity for vehicles. And of course, there's a cost to doing that. It's very expensive to widen roadways, and there can be some significant costs to neighborhood character, to the environment, to community character overall, when we just widen roads. So really that solution of addressing congestion by widening roads is kind of attacking only the symptoms of congestion and not the cause. It's looking at the supply side and not the demand side. And it's really approaching a problem with a single solution rather than a multitude of options and a more comprehensive solution. That's where the idea of travel demand management comes in. Travel demand management, or abbreviated as TDM, is simply a range, a variety of different programs and projects and policies that are intended to limit the demand for single occupant vehicle use and increase capacity for other modes like walking and biking and transit. And so really intended to attack the demand side versus the supply side. It also uses a whole range of solutions and options. So it's kind of the 100 things or the 1,000 things that we can do to address congestion, and not really just the one. TDM seems a little bit strange, but there are actually a couple of programs within the city of Flagstaff right now that are essentially based on the same philosophy. One example is the water conservation program, where we encourage people to use less water because the cost of developing new facilities and of using water without a definite need is a cost that's too much for the city, that it makes more sense economically for us to attack the demand side of it versus trying to meet unlimited supply. And the second one with the same philosophy is the waste reduction program. So instead of letting people we encourage people to reduce their waste, and that helps us on the back end save landfill space and meet all kinds of other environmental and sustainable objectives. So I'm going to try to share a slide here if I can.
And Martin, would another example of TDM traffic demand management be parking? I think about campus and how the cost to park on campus at NAU is so expensive that everyone is packing into buses at every bus stop.
Absolutely, yeah.
I feel like that's such a huge example that we forget, because Martin, what you're saying is so big, and I don't know if those who are going to watch this video and those who aren't going to watch this video really understand what you just said, because it's so different than what we intuitively think. We think, if you build more car lanes, you're going to be able to accommodate more cars. And that's how we get out of this congestion and this traffic that we're facing. And when I often try to explain to people that actually building more car lanes simply worsens the issue, there's quite a reaction to that. And some people get it, like you said, and some people struggle with it. But that's huge. And people feel like we can only build our way out of this congestion and this traffic by building more lanes. And somehow building more lanes is going to solve this issue. And from my research and from talking to people like yourself and others across the nation, and even in parts of Canada at times, that's not the case. That's just not how this works. And it's kind of this false understanding of how to alleviate congestion. And it makes me think about stormwater and stormwater runoff that Flagstaff has experienced a little, unfortunately, pretty intensely, pretty severely, right? And it's like, just because you build a wider pipe to channel the water faster for a certain segment, that doesn't actually mean that you're going to alleviate the congestion. Just because Sedona put 2-lane roundabouts in to help address congestion and traffic flow doesn't mean they're going to actually alleviate congestion. And it's like, you can keep finding more and more examples where we try to build our way out of this, and we only find ourselves that much deeper in the hole. So I think NAU is a great example, because if they didn't, put those pipe prices as high as they were to park on campus, I bet you we would see bumper to bumper on NAU, just like we see on Milton. Sorry, I had to do that, but yeah. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, that's good. Yeah, I think sometimes roadways are compared to water pipes, for example, and to put more water through a pipe, you need a bigger pipe, and that's kind of a very direct cause and effect relationship. But the difference between water pipes and roadways is that people are not water molecules. People make choices based on all kinds of things. We are ultimately responsible. We make the choices for how we travel. And so we always want to take an approach of giving people the most options that they can have for travel, and to make walking and biking and transit really good options for people that are legitimate options that they find appealing. And that to me seems the most effective way of addressing congestion. So just a few thoughts on this slide on shifting how we think about congestion. One, we can acknowledge that congestion is not always something that can be eliminated. So think of where we are in Flagstaff and kind of our circumstances as having a fairly good-sized university, a lot of visitors here, and a road network that isn't really, a classic grid like an old kind of community. And that kind of adds up that it's always going to be difficult for us to have an efficient roadway system. Second, don't assume that congestion is always bad. In one sense, congestion is an indication of activity and economic vitality. It means that we have a lot of people here who want to be here. Places that don't have congestion don't have a lot going on sometimes. So it's kind of, both ends of it. Third, as I mentioned, I think one of the things we need to do is provide better options for people. Let people choose how they want to get around and give them good options for doing that. Next one, measure our capacity in terms of people trips instead of vehicle trips. So we typically plan roadways based on how many vehicles we think are going to use them. But if we measure that in terms of people trips, we'd come up with a different result, or at least a different way of thinking of it. I think the easiest way to think about that one is one of our mountain line buses holds 27 or 28 people. And if those 27 or 28 people were in individual vehicles, think how much more space that takes up on our roadway and how much less efficient that is. But each one of those 27 or 28 in either case is a person trip rather than a vehicle trip. Think in terms of access instead of travel. So we typically measure things in terms of how much delay we experience getting across town. But a better way to look at mobility is to think about how we get from door to door. So our entire trip, even when we drive, isn't made by vehicle. Part of it is typically walking on either end, even if it's just walking across a parking lot to get from that to your front door. So think about how people travel on all parts of their journey and not just the main part of it, which is getting across town. I think we can measure mobility based on whether the least mobile among us can travel to access their daily needs. So again, we typically measure roadway performance in terms of things like delay and level of service. But what if we switched our paradigm and thought about our mobility in terms of people who have a harder time getting around, and that can be due to economic circumstances. Not everyone can afford a car, or it can be due to physical circumstances. Some people just have challenges with mobility. And then finally, a related point is to recognize that mobility is really an equity issue. And so when we plan our transportation system, does everyone in the community accrue its benefits? Does everybody get better mobility out of our transportation improvements, regardless of where they live or their circumstances?
That's great. That's so great. And I mean, this is all tied to our climate goals and sustainability goals and our big shift that we talk about, and that paradigm shift. I love everything we're talking about. And I think at the city, we're going through the growing pains of implementation and kind of walking in this new direction that the city hasn't necessarily walked in, although we've talked about it for 40 plus years. I think we're actually walking the walk and not just talking the talk, more so than ever before. And we're going through some growing pains as expected. But I'm very excited about the direction we're heading in this shift, but there's still a long way to go for sure. And so, Martin, should we keep moving? Should we talk about the? So I think we talked about congestion. I think the key takeaway, folks, is that building more lanes is not going to help us alleviate congestion. If anything, it's going to make things worse. So when we're thinking about projects like Lone Tree and the intersections that we're designing and the number of lanes when we widen roads, remember that the more lanes we put in, the less community character we're going to have, the less sense of place, quality of life, accessibility and comfort for our bikes and our pedestrians and our most vulnerable users, and the more congestion we're going to have in the end, and that we really need mode shift and to create alternatives and give people options, because it is an equity issue. I love that was the last bullet point. This is an equity issue, and I know there's a lot of folks who are like, I drive and I'm not going to stop driving, and that's fine. You can drive as much as you want to drive, but building alternative modes helps us all, including yourself as a driver in the city of Flagstaff, because it adds capacity to the roadway without necessarily building more lanes, inducing demand. So I can ramble about this forever, but let's keep moving. So Martin, speak briefly to the benefits of people walking and biking to a community.
Yeah, and I would say, as we go through these benefits, I think it's fair to think about our transportation planning and our transportation improvements in terms of kind of trade-offs. So like think of everything that we do and consider what we get for it and what we give up for it. So what are we getting and what are we giving up? And is that a fair trade-off? And I think we'll find that the answer is not always the same. It kind of depends on context and circumstance and where you are and what roadway it is and a bunch of different factors. But I think part of doing that is kind of being honest about the impacts and effects of different improvements, and whether that be widening roadways or building facilities for peds and bikes. So just a couple of benefits of walking and biking, and I think that multimodal options are kind of one of those things that there are immediate benefits, of course, to mobility and travel, but I think there's a lot of secondary benefits that fit in with the values of the community and the goals and policies of the community, as stated in Flagstaff's regional plan. And it seems like if you've got something that if you've got an answer that starts to address multiple issues or give us multiple benefits, then it feels like we're really onto something. And it feels like walking and biking kind of fit into that category that, yes, it's a transportation issue, but it really goes beyond that and has broader impacts. I've jotted a few of them down, starting with public health. We know that walking and biking is a healthy form of transportation. We could also include mental health in that. I think, Adam, you mentioned the next one is safety. I think you said that when people walk and bike, it actually is better for everybody. And from a safety standpoint, that's definitely true. When we have good walking and biking networks, safety for everyone benefits, and that includes people when we drive. The third one, of course, is mobility. Walking and biking, giving people better options, gives people better mobility. Fourth one is equity. We talked about that a little bit. We know that not everyone is able to drive. We know that not everyone is able to afford to drive. So how do we provide options and give people good mobility if they don't use an automobile? The fifth one is the environment, and I think that is fairly straightforward in terms of greenhouse gases. You can also think in terms of the effect of large parking lots on ecosystems, microclimates, and that sort of thing. Next one is the economy. We know that places that are good for walking and biking tend to have vibrant economies. Walking and biking projects add to the local economy. We think in the old days, we thought of things like trails and bike lanes and sidewalks as an amenity, and more communities are thinking of them as basic services. So when companies make locational decisions, when people make decisions about where they travel. Things like trails and good walking and biking and community character are kind of at the top of the list for how some of those decisions are made. And the last
Martin,
one, yeah, go ahead.
And to that point, Whitehall Industries, which we're really proud as a new company that's coming to Flagstaff, that's going to be a major employer building electrical vehicle parts and hiring locally and training locally, providing higher paying jobs than the average in Flagstaff. When I met with their owners and their leadership, when they were coming to visit, they stumbled into Flagstaff. They were not planning to make Flagstaff home, nor was it simple for them to do so. But our great team and partners at Econa and at the city team worked hard to really make Flagstaff a viable option for them. But when I spoke with their team, they made it clear to me that they love the sustainability focus. They love that people bike here and that you're able to bike here and all the trails. And they made that a point that the quality of life in Flagstaff is the quality of life that they embody as a company. And they want their employees to really experience that. So right there, something that the city is very proud of is very much tied to what you just said,
Yeah, excellent point. And I think you think about Flagstaff and, quality of life is always going to be our big selling point. It's never going to be plentiful, cheap land or lots of inexpensive labor. So we have to, play to our strong suits, and that's quality of life and trails and the outdoors and all the things that we love Flagstaff for.
A couple other things that came to my mind as benefits to people walking and biking is it's empowering, right? Being on a bicycle is empowering. You're on two wheels, you're powering the bicycle, you're propelling yourself forward. And it really feels like, some kind of, I don't know, it's a lot more rewarding than driving a car, at least in some of our opinions, those of us who bike especially. But I think it's really empowering and it connects you to your body. People ask me, oh, do you go on rides? Do you mountain bike? And the truth is I don't have time often. And so I just ride as a daily way of commuting. And I just try to leave my car at home as much as I can. And so it's a great way to get your heart rate going and stay in shape and work on your mental health, like you said. And then the experience of it, it's just there's nothing like being on two wheels with the air, running, just like in your face and the wind. And it feels really good to be on a bike. And I think it's part of the human experience. And anyone that's been on a bike knows how much fun it can be. And so there's just so many benefits. I love it. But Martin, let's now shift to crash data if you're ready. So crash data is something that I definitely wanted for us to touch upon during this live stream because it's something that the community needs to be aware of. And it's really important because we have a lot of crashes in our city. And there's a lot we can dive into on this topic. So we'll dive into a little bit of it. But we have some great data, and Martin's going to walk us through that.
So I included a link to a report that we did a couple of years ago, and it essentially is a summary of 10 years of crashes involving pedestrians and bicyclists. It goes through 2018. I think we have the information now. At some point, we'll work on updating that. Crashes, for the information that we have at least, are defined pretty specifically. So they have to involve a motorcycle. a motor vehicle. They only can occur on public streets. So crashes that occur in parking lots, private parking lots, or on private streets aren't included. And there has to be either an injury or property damage in the amount of $1,000 or more. So this is just kind of a caveat to understand that there's a definitions to the crashes that we have evaluated.
And Martin, interesting. Really quick, do we have any information on how many crashes don't make the cut?
The police department may have kind of anecdotal information about that.
That's so interesting.
Otherwise, we don't. Yeah, it just is.
Okay.
Yeah, beyond our ability to compile it, really. So just pull out a couple of interesting pieces of information or significant findings from the data. In Flagstaff, over that 10-year period, We found we have an average of 29 pedestrian crashes and 52 bicycle crashes per year. Of those crashes, 7.6 pedestrian and 6.1 bicycle crashes result in either serious injury or death. And for the pedestrian crashes, that represents more than a quarter of crashes. So a quarter of pedestrian crashes result in serious injury or death to the pedestrian.
Wow.
In fact, half of all the traffic fatalities in Flagstaff are pedestrians. Which, when we kind of crunched those numbers, that one in particular kind of jumped out at me. We had no bicycle fatalities from 2012 until 2019, and then we had one in 2019 and two in 2021. And for the period before that, from 2009 to 2012, there was one bicycle fatality per year during that time period. So that kind of gives you an idea of how many and how serious they are. A few other things. For bicycle crashes, nearly half of the bicyclists were between the ages of 18 and 24.
Wow.
More than 2/3 of pedestrians and almost 3/4 of bicyclists are male. So it's a bit skewed in that direction. Milton Road had the highest number of both pedestrian and bicycle crashes. 40% of pedestrian crashes occur in darkness. So I think that's interesting because I'm sure that overrepresents. I'm sure that 40% of pedestrians aren't walking at night, that they're just more likely to be hit at night. A couple other things. All of our crash data involves a determination on the part of the officer who investigated as far as which party was more at fault. So when we crunch those numbers, we find that in pedestrian crashes, 34% of pedestrians were at fault compared to 66% of drivers.
Wow.
And for bicycle crashes, it was a little bit more, but 44% bicyclists and 56% drivers. About 2/3 of pedestrians are crossing the road. And in bicycle crashes, 40% of drivers are making a right turn.
Wow.
Which is a
Oh
really
my
high
God.
number. That significantly outpaces kind of national data that we have
Really?
as far as a comparison. Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. You'd think that we would identify these issues in our crash data and take action. But I guess I'll leave it at that.
Well, we're starting to, and we're trying to,
Right.
the first step was kind of collecting this data, seeing what it tells us, and then we're really working, kind of in the long term or ongoing on how to operationalize it, and what to do with the information to make it, to actually make it safer for walking and biking. Part of it, I think, engineers can do part of it, but I think, police, the educational aspect, all that will also play a role. So we're trying to bring all those groups together and start thinking about crash data and figuring out what to do with it.
Absolutely. Martin, do you have that map accessible? No worries if not. I know it's in the ATMP.
Yeah, I don't have it.
So obviously design plays into all this, and there's ways to design intersections and roads that better prioritize the needs of the bike and the pedestrian and the most vulnerable that use these corridors to get around. And I think a big point I wanted to make, Martin, is that it's not just safety. Like, although most people who watch this video might think of it as safety, all of our roads are technically safe. And so, through an engineer's mind, we're safe. It's really the comfort level and who it is that's getting prioritized. Kind of going back to your earlier comment, who's benefiting and who's, giving something for this, and who's not benefiting. What are the trade-offs? And we prioritize the movement of vehicles and levels of service as a top priority. That's just a matter of fact. And again, the city is working through changing that. But that's the current situation, and that's been the status quo for a long time, and still is today. Cars come first and always have been. And to put bike and ped first is going to really take a conscious effort by council, which we're trying to do and we're taking steps towards, but it's definitely not there yet. We're not there yet, you know. So anyways, is there something else you'd like to share on the slide?
Yeah, just these two links that I included kind of talk about the relationship between how we design our roadways and safety for all users. And the first one is a link to a series of reports called Dangerous by Design. And they look at pedestrian and bicycle crashes every 2 years. I think the report is updated, and then relate that to changes or trends in pedestrian and bicycle crashes to different aspects of roadway design. And then have recommendations for how we can change our roadway design to be safer for all users. The second one is very similar, and it is actually from the U.S. Department of Transportation. So this is a federal agency, and it is the website for the National Roadway Safety Strategy, and they look at safety as kind of across a number of different viewpoints. One of them being both the speed at which vehicles travel. So how do we design our roads and how fast can cars go? And then like the one above it, just in terms of design. So how are we designing our roadways in ways that are safer for all users or less safe for vulnerable users? So I don't know if this is something you can share, Adam, or if I know people can't click on that to get the links, but
yeah, I can add that to the video description later. So yeah, folks will be able to click on that, but not at the moment.
Okay.
That's okay. Very good. Martin, should we move on from crash data, or is there anything else you'd like to say about this?
We can move on.
So, I'll say in closing, there are certain areas of town that have higher crash volumes than other. Like Martin, you said, Milton is a big deal, and in an area where there's a lot of collisions, along Butler, right? And like you said, the average age of the cyclist, I think you said was like 18 to 22 or so. And so to me, that's very clearly these are college students trying to get to and from campus. And NAU really led in a lot of ways in creating bicycle infrastructure in the city of Flagstaff, being one of the early adopters of bicycle networks and bikeways on their campus. So it really is an opportunity, in my opinion, when it comes to what we can do to identify those areas. It's Beaver and Butler, it's San Fran and Butler, it's that whole Butler corridor, it's Milton. And we can identify, how to fix these areas through protected intersection designs and other bikeway solutions that we'll dive into in a minute here. But there's a way to take this data and convert it into solutions to address the root issues here. It's not rocket science, and it's totally doable. It just takes some political will and some leadership. But on that note, let's jump into active transportation master plan and the bikeways plan within it.
Okay, I've got a couple of maps to share with you first. This is all related to the bikeways plan. So this shows an overall bikeways plan for the city based on a hierarchy of 4 different levels. So at the top are primary and secondary bikeways. They really form kind of the backbone of the network. So the things that most people would use to get across town and to really get places on bike. Below that are kind of the 3rd and 4th level bikeways, and those you would use to get from your neighborhood to a high level bikeway, or to get from the main network to a specific destination somewhere along the way. And I'll go to the next slide, and you can see kind of the difference between all of them versus just the primary and secondary. And again, this would be kind of the backbone system for bikeways. as a way to get, to serve a very definitive transportation function. The hierarchy helps us make decisions and kind of guides our policy about bikeways in a number of different ways. First, it tells us where we have our priorities. So really our primary and secondary network is our highest priority to complete and include good facilities. It tells us where we want to include higher level facilities. So on a neighborhood street, we might not need something as robust, but on a primary bikeway or a secondary bikeway, we may want to have a foots trail or a separated bike lane or a protected intersection. It helps us with operations. So for example, maintenance and snow removal, if we need to prioritize among different streets in terms of which ones should be cleared first, the primary and secondary network gives us that information. Same with closures and detours. I think we would make more of an effort to keep these bikeways open during construction, or at least provide a good detour for them because they're part of our backbone system. And then the final aspect is really wayfinding, and having a system like this supports wayfinding in that it makes it easier to get around everywhere, to have a system that is easy to understand like this versus something even like the original one. So under this one, for example, if you lived out here in the Presidio neighborhood and you wanted to go downtown, in terms of wayfinding, all you need to know is to get on the University Bikeway, and then you get to this point, you've got a choice either to take the Milton Bikeway or to stay on the University to the Beaver Bikeway, and you know that will take you downtown. So you don't have to worry about going from this street to that street, getting on this foots trail or that bike lane. If you follow the wayfinding for that primary or secondary route, you can get to your destination. I have seen in San Francisco and a few other places where they take the main bikeway network like this and kind of translate it into a subway map, if you're familiar with how those work. Very stylized, includes really no details, almost no sense of scale, but it just is, it's kind of these straight lines that show you, travel from here to here to here, and you'll get to your destination. And really simplified. So I think that'd be kind of fun to explore. If there's anybody who's talented in both cartography and graphic design in the audience, here's a challenge for you.
There we go.
Anyway, a couple other things about the bikeway network is we want it to be comfortable and low stress. Adam talked before about the importance of providing facilities that are comfortable and appealing for people. Beyond safety, we want them to be safe, of course, but they need to go beyond that and be appealing for people to use. And so when we talk about comfort, it really is dependent on principle of separation, which kind of works like this. On low-level streets that are very low volume and low speed, and think here of your residential neighborhood streets. Most people are comfortable being on that street because traffic is so infrequent and generally moving slow that they don't pose much of a threat. So most bicyclists are comfortable in those streets without real specific bicycle facilities or at least dedicated facilities. And as you kind of move up in speed and volume, we provide bike lanes for people.
Hey,
bike
Martin.
lanes dedicated. Yes.
Sorry, are you sharing any slides different than the original map?
No, it's still just the original map.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure. Okay, go ahead.
No worries.
Yeah.
So as speeds get a little bit higher and volumes get a little bit more, we provide dedicated space on the roadway for bicyclists in the form of conventional bike lanes. We can enhance those a little bit by providing a buffer, just a little bit of extra space between where the bikes are and where traffic is. And then as you get up into the really, more high speed, high volume roadways, and think here of some of the arterials through town, bike lane alone is probably not enough to make most cyclists feel comfortable. So some form of separation from the roadway here really helps. And that separation can be a vertical element, like a wall or a railing or planters, or it could be horizontal where we physically move the bikeway the bike lane off the roadway. And I've got a couple of images that I can share. The first one, this is an example of a shared space, so a local residential street, but we've kind of highlighted it as a way to get around by bike by calling it a bike boulevard. So that it generally involves a lot of pavement markings and some branding and other things to kind of call it out. Here's the buffered bike lane. So it's kind of a conventional bike lane. You're in the street, but you've got a little bit extra room between you and where vehicles are. And we get into different kinds of separation. Here's kind of a Jersey barrier. Here's a concrete curb between the bike lane and travel lanes. Here's a cycle track concept where it's kind of two ways, but it has a concrete curb to separate cars from bikes. These are all, of course, real world examples that exist in different communities. Here's an idea of horizontally separated bike lanes. So you can see that here's a place for bikes, but it's off of the street. And here's another similar concept. Adam, are people able to interact in this forum? I mean,
yes, folks. If you're tuning in and you have any comments or questions, please do put it in the chat box, and we will definitely address them and engage you in this conversation. But yeah, they can.
Here's a couple more versions of the horizontal separation. So this one on the image on the right really shows that it can be kind of an urban approach as well. The other benefit, of course, is that it kind of separates bicyclists from pedestrian traffic. So unlike foot trails where we kind of share the space, pedestrians and bikes, this kind of helps us keep separate. Part of that allows this to be more of a kind of a hardcore commuter facility. So if you want to get across town and you can go fairly fast, this would give you a place to do that, not necessarily have to worry as much about pedestrian conflicts. So that those illustrations all kind of showed the segments of roadway between.
Well, Martin, we do have a comment from Dana. Love the separate horizontal idea, especially in high traffic areas. Dana, can you imagine if that network map that Martin put up had separated a whole network that was separated like that? Can you just imagine how that would impact congestion and how many people would be on that network? You know, I've told Martin since I got elected, you know, if we build it, they will come. And my dream was always that we'd create this network and complete it, and that we'd have lines of people at, you know, intersections on bikes waiting to go through, you know, and obviously that dream is still yet to be realized, and we're still pretty far away, but gosh, yeah, it's inspiring to see these types of networks, right? Thank you for chiming in. And Dana, I would definitely ride this. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, exactly. And so it's 60% of the potential riding population in the city of Flagstaff. You know, 60% of the city of Flagstaff would be able to consider that. You know, that's a big deal. Anyways, go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, this image shows a protected intersection, which really just carries that separated or protected concept through the intersection. I would say the biggest advantage of an intersection design like this is that a bicycle can make a left turn really fairly intuitively and comfortably compared to making a left turn as a vehicle. As a vehicle, you know, on a multi-lane road, you have to kind of move over across a couple of lanes of traffic, get into the left turn lane if there is one, wait for an opening, and then go. And really, you're making that left turn just like you would as a vehicle. And for a lot of people, that is really a not very comfortable maneuver to make. And so this kind of gets away from that and allows you to kind of go around the perimeter of the intersection and make a left turn without actually having to do it like a vehicle. I will say that, you know, we talked a little bit before about evaluating trade-offs and thinking about what you're getting for a particular design or a particular project and what you're giving up. And I think in the interest of full disclosure, when you look at a design like this, what we're giving up is a little bit of convenience for the very hardcore riders. because making that left turn as a vehicle is going to let them go a little bit faster than making a left turn around an intersection designed like this. Also, the through movement you can see is a little bit offset as you go through the intersection. So it's not as straight as going through an intersection like you would in a bike lane. So that's kind of the trade-off that we have to consider. And again, I'd be interested in hearing from anybody in the who's listening in on how they think about that trade-off. And if a little bit of inconvenience for hardcore riders is worth the comfort level that we would be giving to a lot of less experienced riders.
Right. And Jeff's tuning in. Jeff, thank you for joining us and your service on our Bicycle Advisory Committee. Jeff says, got to watch out for those drivers turning right while looking left. It's scary. And Martin, that goes, I was thinking the same thing, Jeff. And Martin, that goes to your point earlier about the crash data. I think you said 40, did you say 40% of bicycle collisions occur while cars are turning right into them?
I did say that, yes.
So here we go, folks. Check out this design. That car is staggered back. There's no right turn on red, which is, like Martin said, a trade-off. Or Martin, I think you were speaking to different trade-offs, but here's a trade-off where the car is almost inconvenienced a bit, and they're set back. There's no right on red. And then when they do turn right, they have to go straight quite a bit towards that bumped out curb and then turn around that curb, basically creating a more visible scenario for that biker pedestrian. So that's another trade-off that's a positive for the bike ped, because they get to start almost right there at the green edge about to cross the street. So they're way ahead of the car, which makes them a lot more visible. And they also often will get the green light first, allowing them to enter and even exit the intersection prior to the car even moving from that stop bar. So that's a big deal in this design, and I love that. And then let's see, Dana writes, how does the city decide where a crosswalk is placed? And secondly, how does a crosswalk deserve a pedestrian activated light system? Great question.
So in the first case, where a crosswalk is placed, and here I assume you're talking about the actual markings for a crosswalk. So the paint that designates it as a crosswalk. Technically, at all intersections, legal crosswalks exist regardless of whether they're marked or not. So whatever protections or legal rights a pedestrian has in a crosswalk per state law, they get at an intersection even if the crossings aren't painted. But you're asking about like mid-block locations where if a crosswalk is painted, then it is officially a legal crosswalk. If there isn't anything that designates it as a crosswalk, then you don't have that legal protection per state law. So I think currently the city uses a variety of what we call warrants for marking crosswalks. And I think this really answers your second question as well, which is which ones deserve a pedestrian activated light system. So it really depends on a number of different warrants. The most important, or the primary one, being how many pedestrians are crossing there. We are looking at different ways of thinking about that and different ways of prioritizing where crosswalks would be designated and where those pedestrian activated lights would be. And we are trying to base it on different kinds of different determinations of what makes a good crossing. So kind of anticipation of where pedestrians want to cross, where there are tractors and generators on one side or the other, where we think pedestrians will be in the future, and base it on that versus how many pedestrians are crossing there now. So that's kind of an emerging discussion. Please stay tuned. I think there are different ways of looking at it. We tend to be fairly conservative with both where we mark them and where we put the pedestrian activated lights. But we're trying to be a little bit more forward thinking about how we plan for those locations. As far as the lights go, I'll give it to Adam and have him share it with you. But we've identified close to 60 places around town
Wow.
where enhanced crossings or crossing lights could be located. We've prioritized them to try to find the ones that are most pressing or most important. And we have a little bit of money to spend on them. We have to prioritize them. We don't have money for all 60.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, Dan,
Aye.
the one on the urban trail at Woodlands Village by the old Walmart is one of the locations that we've identified. I think there are different, I guess, schools of thoughts about having a crossing there relative to where it is along Woodlands Village Boulevard and where it is relative to the existing traffic signal. So we have some internal issues that we need to work out, but we've identified it at least as a place where a crossing could go.
Martin, did you have anything else you want to say about the protected intersection?
Oh, I'm still sharing my screen. There's an example of kind of a real world example of them. They're actually, when you think about how bikes get through them, they're really pretty elegant in their simplicity. We tend to get kind of freaked out by radical design changes, but this one actually is really pretty intuitive and not all that complicated. It's just, different curbs and green paint compared to a regular intersection. And then here's some examples of things that we can do with green paint at other intersections. So here, cross bike markings. This is a 2-stage left turn. This is a bike box, and this is a green paint in a conflict area, so where vehicles are kind of merging across the bike lane. So we have a lot of tools at our disposal to really make this bikeway system into something that works for the whole community. That's all I have to say about it.
Very good. Very good. So as we're starting to wrap up our time, I want to make it clear, the Active Transportation Master Plan, the ATMP, and the Bikeways plan within that speak to everything that Martin's presented on today. And I love the idea of these protected intersections, which aren't too common in North America, is my understanding. Correct, Martin?
Well, they're becoming more common.
Nice.
I can show you probably half a dozen cities around and there's more cities that are using them all the time.
That's great. That's great.
And the benefit of that is that we're learning from their experience as well. We're starting to collect crash data, really be able to refine the different details of the design to make them work well.
That's great. So, this week, so there's so much happening at the city on this front, and like we were saying, like there's a lot of things changing internally, and like our guiding values, our priorities. Those are all things that council is wrestling with staff and the community, and trying to really, get us caught up to speed and kind of put our money where our mouth's at in regards to our guiding documents, like the regional plan, the carbon neutrality plan, the bikeways and ATMP, et cetera, et cetera. And this Thursday and Friday, council has a very important budget retreat where we are going to be taking a deep dive into our budget one last time, basically, before it comes to council for adoption in June. And so I have argued and made the point at the council level that we can better align ourselves to these types of projects. And I've helped to identify 6 of them around town that I just want to go through with you really quick, the public. One of which is Riordan. We heard from Martin that Milton is a huge conflict point in a place where there's a lot of crashes. And this won't fix it all, but if we had a Riordan bikeways network, what's it called, a cycle track, right? If we had a cycle track on Riordan giving us a parallel option to Milton, I think that would be very heavily used. And anything you want to say about that before I move on to the other projects?
No, I think we saw the issues with Milton, and some people there are destinations along Milton that people are trying to get to, but there are also people that are just trying to get from some of the neighborhoods to the south, like University Heights and Ponderosa Trails. And really, Milton or the university are kind of their options. So we give them a good direct route that's parallel to Milton. I think it'll be well used.
Absolutely. And then another project is our bike pilots that we have started. we've done phase 1 and phase 2 being Butler and Beaver. And now we need to talk about phase 3, which is evaluating the data, discussing what worked well, the feedback we've received, and identifying what the path forward is. So that's another discussion that council needs to have, and ideally sooner than later. Those bike pilots were just that. They were pilots. And we need to learn from those experiences and improve upon them if we so desire. But we need to at least have that conversation, and the leadership internally and also amongst council to make sure that that conversation is had and that there's potential budget funding for that. So that's also part of the conversation this week. Another thing is the intersections at Butler and Beaver and Butler and San Francisco Street are two of our more dangerous intersections in the city. And Martin didn't share the map where it shows the different areas where all the crashes occur, but those intersections are lit up like a Christmas tree from all the crashes that occur. And it is concerning. And again, like I said earlier, we know what we can do about it. And it's protected intersections, which is what Martin just talked to us about. So we can do protected intersections at Beaver and Butler and San Fran at Butler, and that will make a world of difference. And that costs, from my understanding, around $1 million. Maybe a little bit more now with the increase in costs, but not a whole lot of money when you're talking about a city budget. Martin, before I leave the Butler corridor area, is there anything you want to share about that?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. I mean, we have a lot of needs, in terms of bikeways and improvements that we could make. Our funding is limited, so figuring out what the priorities are is really important.
Right, absolutely, and that's a community conversation through our city council. So that's where you all play in. You hold us accountable, and we work for you, the public. I've always said that. So we have that chance as a council and as a community, and it's exciting. And it's going to occur this Thursday and Friday. Another project is the 4th Street corridor, and basically 4th Street. I like for us to talk about right sizing and go from 5 lanes, which I believe is enough carrying capacity for the next 30 plus years, is what's predicted, to 3 lanes, and basically right size that roadway to benefit that community, and put cycle tracks on both sides of that road. And then I'd also like for us to address the 4th Street 66 intersection and right size that intersection, along with implementing a protected intersection there as well. Martin, any comments about any of that?
No, I think we've identified where missing sidewalks are in different places around town, and that if you're familiar with 4th Street from Route 66 up to Cedar or Lockett, there are long stretches on the east side of 4th Street where sidewalks are missing. We don't have the right of way to build them outright. We need to acquire some property from some of the private landowners along there. Those sections of sidewalk, because there are good attractors and generators in that area, because they kind of check the boxes for equity, are some of our highest priority according to our system. So finding a way to get them built would be very beneficial for that neighborhood and the city at large.
Absolutely. 30% of Flagstaff doesn't have access to a car. Whether it's because they're too young, or that it's an equity thing, or a cost thing, or whatever it might be. We need to accommodate for all modes and create alternative mode options for the sake of congestion and the sake of all those who are driving, and all those living in Flagstaff. Right. This is kind of just the approach I believe we need to be taking. And those are the projects. So step 1 is getting design work done on all 6 of those projects that I just laid out for you all. And that's not a whole lot of money, and that will set us up in a position where we can then look for grant funding, or even consider internal funding for some of those projects. And I think we can really transform our community in the way we move if we get those projects through and going in the next 5 years. So engage this week at our capital or our budget retreat on Thursday and Friday. You can email council if you'd like. There's one address that reaches us all. It's council@flagstaffaz.gov. and you can always engage in public comment however you'd like. But these are important times, and the status quo is not working, and we really need to rise up to the challenge and put our money where our mouth's at. And so the budget is a big deal, and I think we can better align. So tune in this week and spread the word. Folks, we're past time. Martin, we're past time, but that was a great conversation, and I so appreciate you taking the time to join the community on this platform and chat about these different points. What are your closing words and words of wisdom to the community as we start to, enter the spring and summer season and bike month and all this exciting time for why we love to live in Flagstaff, this good weather that we can bike in. What are your comments to the community heading into summer?
Oh, well, summer is an absolutely glorious time to be in Flagstaff and to get out walking and biking. I think you mentioned it earlier, but we are experiencing growing pains as a community, and we really need to have kind of a place or a forum to have a lot of community conversation about transportation and to talk about some of those trade-offs and what our priorities and what our values are. They won't be. Some of them will be difficult for sure. I mean, I think we're seeing that already. Have no illusions that this will be easy, but we need to keep the conversation moving forward.
Absolutely. Well, cheers, everybody. Ride safe. Get out there. Get out there for Bike Month. Engage in the competition. Spread the word. Join us at the Bike Bazaar, and let's have a really nice summer of bicycling activities. Started with this upcoming budget retreat, so let's get on the right page as a city with our funding and really start making some moves and some headway. Again, thank you all for tuning in, and Martin, thank you for joining me this evening, and have a good night, everybody. See you soon.
Bye, everyone.